All right, hi, I'm Reese. I'm here with my colleague Kian. We're going to present our SimAUD 2020 paper on space analysis. So there's been a growing interest in spatial metrics that try to capture the experience of people in built environments. Let me give you an example. This is a real-world application of generative design. It was presented at SimAUD 2017, so a few years ago, and it was called Project Discover. The authors used generative design to lay out Autodesk's Mars office in Toronto. They had a few goals. For example, they wanted to minimize travel distances, minimize distraction. They wanted to maximize views to the outside, and they wanted to provide as many people as possible with daylight. And so they captured these experiences with metrics, and then they fed those metrics into the generative design process. Now, what we want to do is we want to help people develop their own generative design workflows with their own metrics. And so that's why we developed this tool, SpaceAnalysis. So SpaceAnalysis provides pathfinding, visibility, and acoustics analyses. The idea is that you could use the results of the analyses to compute metrics for generative design. SpaceAnalysis takes the form of a Dynamo package. It's gotten about 2,000 downloads so far. It's a lightweight tool. It's meant for getting quick results for many different design options. Now, one of the notable aspects of SpaceAnalysis is that it uses one representation for all analyses. And so that we had to choose what representation to use. So there's basically, broadly speaking, there's two types, and we chose to use a grid-based representation. And there's different types of grids. The 4 neighbor grids, for example, or 8 neighbor grids. We chose the 8 neighbor grids where each point is connected to at most 8 of its nearest neighbors. And so that had to, that has the advantage that the user only has to create one type of data structure. For example, there's the space lattice node, and the user provides it a bounding box, a set of barriers like walls, and a grid resolution. And that produces a space lattice, which is this data structure here. Notice that each point again is connected to 8 neighbors, except close to a barrier, like this wall here. If it's close to a barrier, then some of the connections get cut off. And then this data structure it can be used for pathfinding or visibility or acoustics. All right, so the paper makes both a theoretical contribution and a practical contribution. We're going to start with the theory, and this has to do with how you take building geometry or urban scale geometry and produce the space lattice. And there's 2 discretization methods that we're going to show. So first, the basic method. So you start with a bunch of lines that represent barriers like walls, and you want to figure out which space lattice points can still be connected even though there's some barriers there. So the first step is to take those lines, the barriers, and convert them into a grid representation. So they get discretized, and that's done using Bresenham's line algorithm, which is a standard algorithm. So then next, the space lattice points get connected whenever they're not blocked by those barrier cells there. And that's basically it. So you get your space lattice. Now, the method that we actually implemented in SpaceAnalysis is what we're calling the enhanced method. And there's a couple differences here. So first, you take the same set of barriers, but you discretize them at twice the resolution of the space lattice grid. So now you get a sort of a finer representation of the barriers. And then what we do is we expand the barrier cells out 1 cell in all directions, and then contract them back in. And that has the effect of filling in small gaps that we figure are too small for people to get through. And it's only after doing that that we connect the space lattice points. So notice that with the 2 methods, we started with the same geometry, but we ended up with different space lattices, different sets of connections between the same set of points. All right, so we implemented the enhanced method because we thought it would be better than the basic method. And in the paper, we tested this. And here's how we did that. So we did an experiment. In the experiment, we set up these very simple scenes where we had, say, 1 wall and a passage between them. And we wanted to see whether you could get from point A to point B on the space lattice. And we did this tens of thousands of times, each time varying things like the angle of the geometry or the width of the passage or the placement of everything on the grid. Now the details are in the paper, but I'm just going to give you sort of the high-level takeaways from the results. So here's what we found. First, we found that with the enhanced method, you can get through smaller gaps. So notice how the purple curve for the enhanced method is on the left. So that means that you can get away with using a coarser grid resolution, which means you get your analysis results faster. So you're actually going to get faster results if you use the enhanced method. And the other thing that we found, and we tested this on several different scenarios, the other thing we found is that the results are more robust with the enhanced method. So notice that the purple curves are steeper. That means that the enhanced discretization method is less sensitive to sort of the angle of geometry and how things end up falling on the grid. So we did find that the enhanced method that we used was actually quite a bit better than the basic method. All right, now I'm going to hand it over to Kian, who's going to talk about the practical side of the work.
Okay, thanks, Reese. So I'm going to talk through some of the samples that are provided with the SpaceAnalysis package, and you can find them on your Windows system by entering the text here inside your Explorer window, Explorer, but just make sure that you swap the X for the version of Dynamo that you're using. Okay, if you could go ahead, Reese. So in this next video, we're just going to see 3 different samples get loaded. So we're going to, inside Dynamo, we're going to browse to that folder. In this case, it's for Dynamo 2.6, and we're going to load the first sample, which relates to pathfinding. And this is going from many start points to one end point. So we can see automatically that it's been run. We're just going to rotate the view around a little bit and then manipulate one of the starting points in order to see how the shortest path adjusts as we move that point. So here we're going to move one particular point, and as we see, we go around to the edge. The shortest path is all of a sudden going to be directly to the end point. If we go back the other way, it'll snap across to the other side of the wall. And then as we cross that wall, we'll see that it'll go directly once again to the end point. So the next sample that we'll look at relates to visibility. And in this case, we're going to just take a simple example of a single point with global visibility. Now there is a radius, so that it does tail off after a certain distance. But once again, we're going to manipulate the position of this point and see how it affects the visibility around on this particular within this space. So to start with, going to move towards one barrier on the bottom and then towards the other barrier and then snap across to the other side of the barrier. And we can see how that changes our visibility. The third and final sample that we'll look at relates to acoustics. Now in this example, we're going to once again have a single point source for noise. And we're going to see, once again with 2 barriers, but we're going to move this point source across the barrier and see how things change there once we get to the other side, and then pull it right back down to the bottom of the other barrier. And we can see how sound is absorbed by the barriers. Okay, so those are the 3 very quick demos. Please take a look at the other examples that we have that we're provided with SpaceAnalysis. So if we move to the next slide. So onto Project Rediscover, and this was really the driving force behind developing SpaceAnalysis, as Reese has said. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we have a GIF animating with the various steps of the geometry system and the metrics. So if you build the slide, Reese. So in the geometry system, we're splitting essentially a floor plan according to neighborhoods by using a Voronoi pattern. And the center of the various Voronoi cells are relative to spines that pass through the building, and then amenity blocks are placed either on one side or the other of those central spines or of the neighborhood splits, and then the desks will fill the remaining space. And then we take a look at the evaluation. We're going to use pathfinding to do shortest path analysis between each of the desks and certain important points. So we use that to calculate buzz, the amount of energy and sort of noise there will also be in that space, as well as the adjacency, to make sure that we minimize the adjacency from people's desks to important locations in the building. Similarly, we use visibility to assess both views to outside from people's desks, but also the level of distraction that people will have at their desks, depending on the direction that they're sitting and facing. There are other metrics that are included in the evaluation system based on daylight and work style preferences, but these do not make use of the space analysis package. And finally, both this whole sort of parametric model that comprises the geometry system and the evaluation system can then be optimized using what was formerly known as Project Refinery, which is now the generative design feature in Revit 2021. So here's an image that's been captured, which shows many different designs that have been generated by that parametric model and the refinery system. Then we can move on to the next slide. And here's one more, which shows a different 3D visualization of that same generative design run, that same study. As we can see, really, space analysis has been intended to be run frequently and across many different design options. So that's really the purpose for it being lightweight and efficient. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Kian. So that was a quick overview of our SimAUD 2020 paper. Just a quick recap. As we mentioned, space analysis all the analyses are based on a 8-neighbor grid. We showed 2 different discretization methods that create the space lattice, the basic method and the enhanced method that was actually implemented in the software. And we found experimentally that the enhanced method worked better. We also took a look at how space analysis could be used for generative design. And I'd like to point out that the example that Kian showed, that's available for download if you go to the link at the top. All right, the limitations of space analysis include the fact that it's limited to 2 dimensions and only a single scale. So future research could look at 3-dimensional representations that perhaps work at multiple scales. We would like to acknowledge our co-authors, Simon and Azam, who co-developed the tool with us. We look forward to feedback from you. Thanks for watching.